I want you to imagine this. The year is 2009. Halo 3 is still pumping. Gears of War is the game to be playing on Xbox Live. But out of nowhere, a game from totally left field comes at you. And you're watching this trailer because your buddy told you about it online. And you hear a grizzled old man talking about, "Do you want to hear a story?" And you see this post apocalyptic desert wasteland. And what rolls next, you'll never forget. The sound of Cage the Elephant's Ain't No Rest for the Wicked is playing in the background with that iconic guitar tone. And you see, one by one, our heroes come up on screen doing an assortment of body shots, headshots, weapon types, all that good stuff. Now, if you don't know what we're talking about, today we're going to be talking about the very first Borderlands game that dropped in 2009. Welcome, friends, to the expLOREation podcast. We are your hosts. I am Gabe, and over there I have Greg.
Hi.
And like I mentioned prior, we're going to be talking about Borderlands 1 today and what made it so great. We're going to be looking at game design, gameplay, all that good stuff. So just for reference, this game in 2009, from October 2009 to December 2009, so 2 million copies. That's not bad from Gearbox Studio for their first AAA release, right? That's actually pretty phenomenal. And so why we're covering this is because in September of 2019 this year, we're getting Borderlands 3. So what Greg and I have decided to do is that we're going to go through all the games and play them in order. We actually plowed through Borderlands 1 we finished it 2 weeks ago roughly, right?
Yeah, 3 weeks ago.
And so I think we're ready to do a little bit of a review on it. And so we got some goodies packed for you. The first thing I want to talk about is all these characters or classes, whatever you want to call them, that you can play as. So we have your standard 4. Right. And we have Roland as the soldier. His ability is the turret. For those of you who don't know, he deploys a turret, and this turret gets all sorts of upgrades, which include health regen, ammo regen, shield regen, and there's a whole bunch of different class trees. Then we have Lilith as the Siren. Sirens are pretty cool. We'll get into that later.
Oh, yeah.
But she has a phase lock ability.
Yeah.
I get all the phase locks mixed up. This is the one where she plane walks between realms, right?
Yeah, and she doesn't get hit by enemies, and her abilities usually stem from being able to melee within this realm.
And then when she phases back in, there's a big nova explosion.
Yeah, depending on the...
We got Brick. Brick is... I think he has arguably one of the better personalities out of these 4. He's just fucking hilarious. His intro role is Brick as himself, and he just pulverizes shit left and right. He smacks things with his fists. You can augment those fists with all sorts of abilities. Good stuff. And then probably my favorite out of the 4, Mordecai. He's the first one I played. I had a lot of good fun with him. He has a Bloodwing, which is his pet eagle sparrow with this weird mutated thing, and it flies around and kills your enemies. It's pretty cool. But with that said, let's talk about Borderlands 1. So the first thing anybody notices when they view Borderlands, when they play Borderlands, is this beautiful art style.
Right.
So this type of art style is called cell shading, and it makes it pop in a very unique way. It almost looks like cartoonish to an extent. But there's enough detail to make it, I guess, adult rated. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the blood splatters are phenomenal, the head pops are great, and all that good stuff. But so Gearbox wanted originally a very realistic art style for this game.
Right.
And I'm actually super glad they didn't take that approach. I believe they dropped that in 2006-ish. The E3 of 2006, they dropped the gameplay trailer, and it generated like little to no interest.
Right.
Because you had games like, I mentioned probably like Gears of War that look fucking phenomenal.
Yeah, Fallout 3.
Fallout 3, Halo 3. You had all these giants dropping these gorgeous games. Man, you put up Halo 3, that game still looks fucking phenomenal to this day. You know, it's just the ambiance is so great. So when they dropped that initial kind of gameplay, it didn't generate enough interest. So what Randy Pitchford and the art team decided was that we need to do something to make this game stand out. And they went with the cell shaded style that gives it this really almost cartoony appeal. And we'll get into the how that relates with everything later. But I'm really glad they did this because first and foremost, I love the cell style shading artwork. A couple of my favorite games are actually cell style shaded, like Jet Set Radio and Jet Set Radio Future are both cell shaded. And just the visuals you get from a lot of these games, they're just, I don't want to call it quite pop artish, but man, it really sticks with you. You know what I'm saying? Like if you were to ask me to remember my favorite level from the Borderlands games or from like Jet Set Radio, it's like clear as day in my head. You know what I'm saying? And it does that so well because it burns this image, this beautiful fucking image into your head.
One thing I actually found interesting is that, and Gearbox has actually come out and said this, Borderlands is not actually cell shaded. It's a type of art style. It's called Sobel. There's a difference between you can see.
Okay, so I was grossly wrong, huh?
Oh yeah, you can see it. I mean, it's close enough, and there's a big mix up. Games like Torchlight actually have cell shading. But like I said, Gearbox has come out and say this is Borderlands
So what's the difference between the two? Because they are pretty close.
Yeah. There's like a separate. It's like a separation between like the colors. Like the lighter gray is used for highlights, and the darker gray is used for those parts that need shadow. There's no fade between the color. You can kind of see this with the ambient oculation, like when you enable it
Very
in the
cool.
game.
Very cool. That being said, thank you for that clarification. But yeah, for those of you normies like me, let's just keep calling it cel shaded, right?
Yeah.
So with the artwork, there's a lot of things to dissect. Actually, the first thing I want to go into is kind of the humor of the game, because I said the artwork directly relates to the humor. This game very rarely takes itself seriously, and you notice that through some of just the gaudy shit these characters say and some of the weird stuff. I mean, the first thing I noticed when I booted up the game back in '09 was like you have literally midget versions of a lot of these enemies running at you and going, you know, like
making that
that's
noise.
fucking great. What other game do you get to like destroy midgets in? You know,
Yeah.
I'm glad that Gearbox didn't take a super serious approach to this, because how many serious games have you played? Probably hundreds, right? I know I have, probably in that area. Now, how many of them stick out to you? How many of them do you like genuinely love and stuff like that? You know, probably a handful, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I love this almost comedic, satirical approach to a shooter genre, because Bulletstorm did it, and that game has a lot of problems of its own, but the humor stood out to me, and that's why I kind of liked it.
Yeah,
you know
there's
what I'm
probably
saying?
like a cult following. For
And
that game,
with this game, Borderlands 1, and the future entries, they've made a name of making cameos or like references to other series. Like we're currently plowing through Borderlands 2, and you know there's the Dark Souls reference, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle references, all that good stuff.
Game of Thrones.
That is the Borderlands kind of gimmick, that they're referencing all these other cameos, gimmicks, genres, styles, whatever it is, right? And what do you think is your favorite part about the humor or how the game presents itself?
Well, I mean, when it comes to the humor, looking at future entries, there's pretty much like a small, like a less serious. It's more of a serious approach, but the humor is still there. But you know, you got to see what Gearbox has been doing. Like they took a gamble with this, you know, with this whole loot shooter.
Yeah, with their first AAA title and this kind of genre blending game.
So
Absolutely.
you can see that they kind of still wanted to take the serious approach, but they did throw in that humor here and there. I like the humor from one of my favorite characters. What was his name?
Marcus.
No.
Marcus is great.
Guy with the glasses. He has a shotgun. He gets, you know.
Sir Hammerlock? You talking about him or
No.
Borderlands
From one.
Oh boy, I can't remember his name.
He turns into a zombie.
Turns into a zombie.
He gives you the brains quest in Doctor.
Oh, TK Baja.
Yeah,
there we
TK
go.
Baja.
Yeah, TK Baja's phenomenal. He's your typical redneck kind of character.
Oh, yeah.
You meet him in the Firestone area, and he kind of guides you through. Well, not really, but yeah, he's fucking great. But what I want to point out about the humor of this game is a lot of games don't take themselves seriously, and a lot of games suffer because of that, right? But I think the beauty in this is that the story is relatively serious. The plot, the premise, all that good stuff is relatively serious. And the environments, the world that Gearbox crafted for Borderlands 1 is actually quite a serious one, because you look around and you're like, damn, this planet is a total shithole.
Yeah.
It's totally run down.
Yeah.
But the humor comes through the characters and some of the strange encounters you have. And I think that's what makes it like really beautiful, because you look at like real life, right? There's only a handful of things that I would think are like inherently funny in nature, you know, like the proportions of some animals or whatever it may be, right? But what brings the humor in is the people around it and the characters you're with. And I feel like a lot of these side characters really grow on you. Like I mentioned Marcus before, he did the voiceover on the intro. He is really just a side character, but I feel like he's grown on me so much over the course of these games, and he's just fucking hilarious. He's a gun salesman, for those of you who don't know, but he talks like a big burly man, and I don't know, man, it's just hilarious. He doesn't give a shit about anything but him and his money and his guns, and that shows through a lot of his dialogue and stuff like that. And along with him, we got characters like Dr. Zed, which is another phenomenal character, probably some of the best quotes in the game, and he's your kind of doctor without a medical license setup.
Psycho. Pretty much Borderlands Psycho.
Yeah, absolutely. What was that one quote? I really like, if you're not dead, I'll keep it that way.
Yeah.
I think that is a hilarious quote. Along with that, we got Claptrap, probably the worst of the side characters, and Gearbox acknowledged that, and he's become the kind of scapegoat to blame everything on.
Fun fact, Claptrap was actually an accident during the development process. He was created by it was a low-level assignment when they were running their Jira assignments, and Claptrap literally just came out of a random sketch, and that's how he was born.
That's great. I love that he was I don't want to call it a happy accident, but that he was an accident.
Yeah.
Because he's kind of I don't know how you feel about him. I don't particularly love him,
Oh no.
but I think he is a staple to the game and to the cast and crew, if that
Yeah.
makes sense, you know? And then we got Moxie, your Borderlands 1, really all the Borderlands 1 games, hottie. And I think the dynamic all these characters have together, even just the side characters, is pretty interesting because you got like weird situations where Marcus and Moxie were together, and you got guys like Scooter that's like the son of Moxie, but we don't know who the dad is. You only have like this faint idea, all that
Yeah.
good stuff. I think it really speaks to the writing of the team and the game that a lot of these highlights come through the side characters, the side quests, and all that stuff, and it brings a lot of these people to life. And I think that's really like beautiful of it, you know,
Right.
because we'll get into some of the issues later on, but the characters that inhabit this world, at least some of the higher side characters that are like relevant in most of the games, I think they really bring to life what makes the Borderlands 1 universe special and what makes it so hilarious most of the time, honestly.
Oh yeah. Even when you're in like Old Haven or New Haven, you know those random NPCs that you can just go up to talk to. You know they have some pretty funny dialogue one here and there.
Oh, absolutely. So with that being said, let's dive into gameplay because I think that's arguably one of the most important things about this game. So what Gearbox did by taking a risk was that they blended the genre of RPG, like the number-based system, into a shooter game. Now, I think this was kind of a big risk because prior to this game, I don't believe looter shooters were super mainstream. I'm sure there was a couple out there, and I didn't do my research on this, forgive me.
Yeah.
But this was essentially your first AAA title that brought it into mainstream. And I think that the Borderlands series walks on a very fine line because if you teetered either way on that seesaw, if you added more shooter or more looter, I think the game would be super niche. You know what I'm saying? I think the game would tip in the favor of the other side. But right now, they're walking this really fine line because you could really go into Borderlands and just shoot shit up, you know? It's not going to change anything. And you could have a lot of fun without doing like a lot of research into the guns, the weapons, the numbers, and all that stuff. And that's the kind of the beauty of it. You could take this game as seriously as you want to take it.
Yeah. Or
You know
you
what I'm
can.
saying? Like you and I, our initial first playthrough of Borderlands 1, we were just kind of like, all right, let's trudge along. But then as we started getting higher and higher level, we started researching like what guns and what variants would be most helpful in these situations.
Yeah.
And that really appeals to the RPG side of me. That really appeals to like the whole Dungeons and Dragons side of me because I love stats. I love that number game, that grind. I love to see
yeah.
what can get exploited really
yeah.
quickly. I know you're a big Warhammer fan.
Oh yeah.
And how does that kind of RPG side compare to a lot of what you've played?
Well, like you said, it's always a number game. You just got to know the abilities, what counters what. Like, you know, you have your different elements. So electrical counters better against shields. Fire is better against, you know, flesh. Even corrosiveness is better against, you know, robots, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's how it all ties together. And then overall, like with this game, I generally love it because, you know, like you mentioned, I love the grind. You know, always going through the same steps to see if you can actually get like the better gun or not.
I think I want to compare this grind to something like RuneScape. Now, I've spent a lot of time on RuneScape. I know you played recently too.
A little bit.
So RuneScape is like, I'd say it's like 80% grind, right?
Right.
Where
But
when you get to those higher levels and you
Yeah.
can like max out or whatever it may be, right?
yeah.
I feel like the grind on this is like, it's still a grind at its core, but the Borderlands 1 universe just surrounds you with all this goody stuff that makes it almost takes away. You know, you don't realize it's a grind.
Right.
You're like, okay, well, I know this character drops X weapon, so we just got to keep farming him, you know? And the fact that they don't call it grinding, they call it farming, you know?
Yeah.
It's a small, simple thing, but I believe that just the way everything comes together in this game, like the gameplay mechanics, because it's a looter shooter, you don't have that traditional RPG grind. But I do love it, and you know, I said it satisfies all my like RPG needs on a very basic level, you know. And let's talk about the shooter aspect of it. What do you think? What are your initial thoughts when you played this game for the first time, or when you rebooted it up? How does the shooter compare to other shooters?
I mean, most of it's like pretty much the same. At least like comparing
Your
like,
basic movement system,
yeah,
firing
basic
system,
movement
yeah.
system, jumping, all that stuff. I like the abilities when they came into that play. I thought that was kind of cool. You know how they did the abilities.
Absolutely,
Especially
and the
since it's
skill
first
trees with
person.
them.
Oh yeah, and then
For having 3 main branches and a single character skill tree, I think you get a lot of variety out of it.
oh yeah, you can have many different builds. Yeah, and then just overall, the weapon, like the gunplay, completely different from like any other game is like, you know,
So-
as far as I know.
Now, would you say it feels different from most other games, the gunplay? Because I think that's what's important here.
I mean, especially like when you have all the different manufacturers. So you have like SNS munitions with the heavier ammo count, or you have Malawan with the faster reload. I feel like it definitely is different because normal games it's like it's an assault rifle, you know how it's gonna work, all that stuff. But with this, each especially how they have the 7 parts mixed up within each gun, and how the gun is built when you pick it up, because you can have multiple varieties.
Right.
'Cause
Well, now, walk us through that. Walk us through the loot generating system in this game, because I know it's a bit complicated.
Yeah, so I mean, you basically have like different barrels, stocks, magazine, accessory, grip sight, or body. The only exception is that repeaters and machine pistols, they don't have a stock; they have an action. Um, each gun that you pick up can only have like one of these randomly generated ones, and each one of them you can actually have like a downfall or an upside to the gun.
Okay, so an upgrade or a downgrade, something along those
Yeah,
lines.
something like that. And so with this, the gun can either perform really bad or really good, and depending on that situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said there's 7 key parts to generating a weapon, and
Yeah.
one of the big things of Borderlands was the advertisement was like a bazillion guns, right?
Yeah.
And it really kind of shows in this game, because once you start delving into that numbers game and you start noticing that, hey, this gun has a higher fire rate but it does less damage, you start calculating DPS and you start considering reload speed, magazine size, all that good stuff, right?
Yeah.
You really kind of start getting enveloped into this world where it becomes the looter part of the shooter. You can't get past a certain area, so hey, we got to go back, we got to figure out our weapon situation, our shield situation, whatever that may be.
Right.
Go through some of these manufacturers, because I think this was beautifully done with these manufacturers.
Right.
So there's no, I'm going to compare it to something of the time like Halo 3, right?
Mhm.
Like you have human weapons,
Yeah.
brute weapons, and Covenant weapons,
Covenant
right?
weapons, yeah.
With the Covenant overlapping a little bit on the brute side.
Right.
And the guns handled differently. They had different recoil, different spray patterns, pretty much different on their own terms, right?
Oh yeah.
But the assault rifle played exactly like an assault rifle, you mentioned, right? Like the BR played exactly what you would expect a BR to play like.
Heavy hitting. Slightly big magazine size.
Absolutely. The
all that
shotgun
stuff.
felt good. It sounded great, but this isn't a Halo 3 talk. This is a Borderlands 1 talk.
Right.
With these weapons, you could pick up 2 guns from the same manufacturer, but because of the different stocks, because of the different grips, the barrels, and the gun itself, these 2 guns can feel completely different, and they
Right.
could play completely differently too. It could, you could pick up a weapon that does much higher damage than what your current weapon does, but that'll screw you over in the long run because it takes up more ammo, or it takes longer to fire, or it takes even longer to reload, whatever it may be, right?
Mhm.
So walk me through these manufacturers, because I love this system. I love it.
Oh yeah. So you have Atlas, which has above average damage and magazine capacity. They're kind of seen as like some of the best guns in the game. Obviously, they manufacture machine guns, repeaters, revolvers, combat shotguns, and bolt actions. Then you have Dahl. They have high recoil reduction, but slightly less accuracy. Mainly combat rifles, repeaters, revolvers, some machine guns, combat shotguns, and snipers. Hyperion, which has high recoil reduction and accuracy. They kind of manufacture everything as Dahl, except for they also manufacture rocket launchers. One thing I actually kind of like is Jacobs. In this game, they're viewed as extremely high damage, but lower fire rate and recoil reduction.
I love
and
Jacobs.
They never make elemental weapons, as far as I've seen. Malawan, they have slightly increased accuracy and quicker reload speeds, as well as increased tech regen rates. They only make elemental weapons. SNS Munitions has a very large magazine size. That's pretty much all they have in their guns. TDR has extremely fast reload speeds, but slightly less damage and accuracy. Torg, obviously the Explodey boys, higher damage and fire rate, but less accuracy and recoil reduction. And then finally Vladov, they have very high fire rate, good recoil reduction, and much lower accuracy.
Very cool. So how many is that? 9, 10?
Yeah, it's got to be like, let's see,
Count them up for me. What is the
nine.
Nine.
It's 9.
9 manufacturers.
Well, 11 if you include the
The Iridian weapons.
Iridian weapons and Gearbox weapons that they just dropped.
Iridian gearbox. Very cool. So now take this manufacturer system and you plug that into the whole gun generating equation, and you get millions and millions of possibilities. I love that, man. It was how many games have you come across where the manufacturer of the gun is taken into consideration? I think the closest for me, at least in recent memory, would be Rainbow Six, where, if you have an American operator, you're going to have an American gun. But that's about it. You know, you're stuck with what you're stuck with. It's not like this RNG system with Borderlands 1. And I thought that was pretty excellent.
Oh yeah.
Let's get into these skill trees a little bit.
Skill trees.
Yeah. So each of the 4 characters has a skill tree.
Right.
And as I mentioned prior, each skill tree has 3 main branches. What was the last character you played?
I played Lilith.
You played Lilith. Talk to me about a little bit about her skill trees. So talk to me about the paths you can take, because these are really suited for a couple different play styles, especially Lilith.
Yeah. So you can go down basically a more elemental path, which helps with elemental weapons as well as a little bit adds elemental abilities to your phase walk. You have a healing path, so you can regenerate health within your phase walk and just go through, and it helps with healing. And then I believe you have kind of like a melee-ish path. You can take that. You have the ability to melee through phase walk, and it gives you all sorts of other goodies, such as like increase grenades and whatnot. So, I went down the elemental path because I feel like when you're playing with Lilith, you mainly want to go with SMGs and
Yeah,
elemental
definitely. You
weapons.
want to take advantage of that situation.
Right.
The last character I played was Roland in the run through we did, and he plays a soldier with a turret drop. The way I built him was I built him mainly around that turret being like your best friend when you're out in the field. So
And
it
it
has.
was.
I maxed out the if a player's downed, it has a chance to revive him. The ammo regen, grenade regen, all that good stuff. Health, shield regeneration, all that stuff. But there's also a couple of ways to build Roland, and one of them is like super aggressive. So like your shots per round increase, all that good stuff. And I don't know, man. I think it really speaks to the developers that took the time to sit down and really think this out.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's really easy to cheese out on, especially like a Roland type character.
Oh, yeah.
How many games have you played where you build like a defensive unit and he just distracts the enemy, or he soaks up a lot of damage and becomes a tank, right?
Oh yeah.
But I went into it with the mindset that we're playing co-op, and I'm going to need to take care of you, and I'm going to need to take care of myself, and sometimes that means dropping a temporary third character, right?
Right.
And that was the beauty of it. I haven't played Mordecai in a while, but a lot of his stuff was increasing the time Bloodwing flies around, giving Bloodwing all sorts of upgraded damage, having Bloodwing fly through multiple enemies at once, right? And I'm sorry if I butchered any of those, but that's just from what I remember from 10 years ago or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And then Brick, I played Brick the least, so please forgive me if I don't delve too deeply onto Brick. But he's a fun character. What shall we cover next? Let's talk about. All right, so we covered the gun system, we covered special abilities and skill trees. Let's talk about some of these enemies.
Oh.
What is your favorite enemy in the game?
Definitely the midgets.
The midgets?
I love the midgets.
The general midgets? Midget psychos? Or
Midget psychos.
very cool.
Mainly their little squealing noises and just seeing a pint-sized enemy running at you with a what is that, a buzzsaw?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just
I love the
something about 'em.
psychos in general, including the midgets, just because it's the mascot of the Borderlands series that they really pushed out. I mean, there's a psycho on every game cover, right?
Yep.
And I love that. I gotta say, my favorite enemy to play against though is some of these guardians, these Seraph guardians towards the end of the game.
Ooh.
I just love that they take up all this damage, and they're a bit of a challenge,
Well,
and
it's mainly those shields, at least from like what I've seen.
Oh, yeah,
like their
absolutely.
shields like literally absorb bullets, but once you actually get that thing off, then their health kind of drops real fast.
yeah, absolutely. I love playing against them though. I always love a good challenge.
Oh yeah.
So with these enemies, obviously this is an RPG style type of game, so you're gonna level up and you're gonna do a new game plus all that good stuff. So when you do your new game plus, you notice that a lot of these enemies not only are leveled to match whatever your level is, right? In most cases,
Most
but a lot of
cases.
the time they'll have a new prefix. And so what this prefix does a lot of the times increases their accuracy, increases their gear, increases their health first and foremost, right?
Oh yeah.
But the beauty of level scaling is that when you do a new game plus, you're not totally bored out of your mind, which makes sense to do, right?
Exactly.
But it not only adds the challenge of, hey, these guys can take more bullets, but a lot of these times, these bandits can now roll, or now these bandits can dodge, or these psychos are more aggressive, or they have a fatter shield. And now you really got to kind of take into consideration your gear, your action, the way your points are distributed, and all that good stuff. So with enemies, let's talk some scaling stuff, right? So your first playthrough, ideally, if you do this the correct way, according to what Borderlands 1 says,
Yeah.
is that playthrough 1 should take you from level 1 all the way to level 30 roughly. Now, when I played this game the very first time, I think I took it from 1 to like 26 or 27. I really kind of pushed that, that minimum, because I didn't do a lot of these side quests. I didn't do a lot of grinding. I just tried to plow through the main story and get to playthrough 2.
Yep.
So that should take you 1 to 30, playthrough 1. Then playthrough 2 ideally should take you 30-ish to whatever the level cap is. 51, 61?
I thought it was 69.
That's Borderlands 2. Borderlands 1 is, I believe it's 51. Don't quote me on that.
No, it was 69.
Is it 69
Yeah.
Borderlands 1?
Yeah.
Well, whatever the level cap is, right? And then you have the DLC. Now, the DLC is a whole crazy thing of its own because you could start these DLCs at any time during the game where you have fast travel unlocked. And when that intro cinematic rolls, all the enemies in that particular DLC will scale to you. So whatever, or the highest leveled player in the game in your party at the moment, right?
Right.
And that's really nice for a couple of reasons because one, if you frankly don't want to plow through the main story, you could plow through the DLCs, right? Because I'd say the DLCs storylines are better than the main storyline. We'll get into that later, of course.
By far.
But that's the upside of it. But I think also the downside of it is what we ended up doing. We ended up plowing through the Borderlands 1 story, and immediately after the campaign, we hopped into all the DLCs. And we played all the DLCs, and then we came to this point where playthrough 2 was so grossly easy for those early, like, half of the game. And it was because all the enemies were scaled in the DLCs to us. And, you know, we were getting good XP, we were getting better weapons, all that good stuff. But playthrough 2 didn't scale up like that. So now comes the question of how should you play the game? Should you play playthrough 1? Like, you know, the campaign playthrough 1, play the campaign playthrough 2, and then the DLC? So that would be most efficient, right, for your leveling and all that good stuff?
Yeah.
And you'd waste the least amount of time. Or should you do in segments? So you do a chunk of campaign 1, and then you do some DLCs, you come back, you do it, you know? So that's the kind of question that Borderlands 1 presents, especially now since I don't even think you can buy the base game, or it doesn't make sense to buy the base game. You want to get the game of the year, right?
Yeah.
Pay the couple extra bucks, get all the DLCs, get all the goodies for you, right?
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know, man. What are your thoughts on these? I feel like this could have been handled a lot better. And of course, this is a game from 10 years ago, so there's only so much we could do about it. There's only so much Gearbox can even do about it.
Yeah.
But what is your ideal playthrough?
So my ideal playthrough would be to probably plow through playthrough 1, start maybe 1 or 2 DLCs, and then go ahead and go through playthrough 2, and then start the rest of the DLCs. That's how I would do it, especially with General Knox. You know, you have that.
It makes sense story-wise to do
Yeah.
The campaign, and then a lot of all the DLC stories are contingent within the main story besides 1, right?
Yeah.
The Moxie's Underdome, which
Yeah.
doesn't really have a main story. But yeah, man, it's really up to the player, and I like the freedom of choice, man. But like I said, I have some issues with some of the scaling, especially when you do it that way, because like I said, that's the way we did it. We did campaign 1, we did all the DLCs, and we came back to campaign 2, and it felt like it almost wasn't even worth playing at that point because everything was a one-shot for us.
Right.
And it would have been probably a couple hours of story time before we got up to anything remotely worth a challenge. And yeah, but that is how enemies and scaling work. So, with Borderlands 1, we've been hyping it up for a good chunk of time, right?
Oh, yeah.
It is worthy of all the praise and worthy of all the good stuff said about it. With that being said, we can't speak greatly of a product, a game, whatever it may be, without mentioning some of the downsides, because there's only so many games that are near perfect, and probably none that are perfect in its own sense, right? Because
Right.
perfect is subjective. So, what is your main downfall? What do you think is the main downfall of this game? Because I have a couple things in mind.
Definitely the scaling. I feel like some areas,
Mhm.
you know, you can either walk into an area and then have enemies that are 4 levels above you, which then you'll obviously have to go back, grind, and then come back, and it's just a whole process.
My first mess up with scaling was I started exploring a little bit in Firestone, and I ran into Bonehead, and he was like level 13
Oh, man.
or 11 or whatever level he is, and I was like level 5, and he just decimated me.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, how do I do this? You know?
Stay in the back with a sniper.
Yeah, so that's what I ended up doing. Fun fact, but it took like a whole clip and then some, right?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, the scaling, it can be an issue, especially now that, like I said, DLCs and all that good stuff. Another big issue I had with this game was that none of these characters felt super real or super invested. I feel like they were all vault hunters looking for the vault, which is exactly what they were doing, right?
Right.
But I didn't feel like any of them had like a purpose or reason or why these particular 4 characters are there. And I was lacking kind of that storytelling element. In addition to the storytelling element, I think the campaign was rather weak in this game. I felt like the narrative was a lot of times in the background. And of course, you got the cutscenes, which bring it to the foreground, blah, 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 yada, yada, right? But I feel like most of this grind was like, hey, let's do X and Y in order to get closer to the vault. And then when it was vault time and that boss fight came around, the payoff just wasn't worth it for me. And I feel like, in fact, a lot of these side quests were more interesting than the main quest. And that's what I felt like coming out of the game.
Right.
Characters, some of these characters, I don't even, well, not even Claptrap, but Tanis Steele, or what was her name, Mrs. Steele?
Oh, no.
Patricia
Patanis? Yeah, the weirdo?
No, not Patricia Tanis, the one that gets
stabbed.
the one that gets stabbed. What was her name? Commander Steele?
Yeah, Commander Steele.
Commander Steele. She felt like a total throwaway character. She felt like she was there because she needed to be there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. She was pretty much like kind of wasted. You didn't really interact with her.
What'd she have, like a couple missions worth of time because she was introduced?
She was just literally in the top, corner on the radio, and then next thing you know, as soon as you actually meet her IRL,
yeah,
it's cut.
Dunzo. In addition to that, let's talk about this big old world, especially them early levels in Firestone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of rough around the edges.
Quiet.
And you especially notice it when you jump from one game to the other. It is so grossly quiet. Firestone in particular, those early like super deserty levels, it feels like it looks good, first and foremost, right? But there's not a lot to do in there. And there's not much to kind of get through. And you have your side missions here and there. But I feel like a lot of it is either walking or driving through this empty wasteland with the occasional skag or bandit coming at you. And it really does feel empty, and that's kind of sad. It doesn't feel empty in the same sense that something in Skyrim or in Fallout that is empty, and it's empty because of a reason, right? And it feels natural. This feels like they had very limited resources, and they chose where to scatter their people. And it feels empty for no good reason, if that makes sense.
No, yeah.
Now, you drove my ass through half this game. How did it feel driving through it, man? Because, I was on Gunner, and when you're on Gunner, you don't have a lot of responsibilities, really.
Well, if it was with that... what was that Roadrunner that we had
Yeah.
in General Knox? If it was with that, then, there was never a dull moment with that, especially since you're losing control half the time. But other than that, just driving through it, I mean...
How was driving through, like, the Firestone area and that whole Skag Gully, all that good stuff?
I mean... Are you talking about, like, the driving mechanics in general?
No, not the drive. I'm talking about how was it going through everything? Like, do you think...
I feel like it was, like you said, it was extremely quiet. Everything was kind of close to each other, so... There's not much really going on, and there's not much to look at. You just kind of want to go from point A to point B.
And it almost feels like a waste of time walking from point A to point B, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Because the moment you unlock the catch-a-ride, you take that everywhere. Why would you walk? And I feel like at least those early levels, it doesn't reward much for exploration and curiosity.
No.
Like I said, you'll get the occasional side mission, you'll get the occasional loot chest here and there, but really... whatever you can do on foot, you could do much faster and much more efficiently with the catch-a-ride system. And it almost feels like a waste, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because the only time that I can think of off the top of my head was if you have a bounty in Firestone, you got to get out the car to submit it.
Yeah.
But most of the other times, you could drive up to wherever the hell you need to go. And yeah, man, it's just wasted space. I feel like they could have either condensed it down or added a lot more stuff in there. And we'll talk about that when we get into our Borderlands 2 review in the next coming weeks. But... that is kind of my bigger issues with the game. Now, with the 10 years and with the announcement of Borderlands 3, Gearbox Studios has released the Game of the Year Enhanced Edition, is what they're calling it, right?
Yep.
So it is Borderlands 1 with a graphical update. You get the full 4K resolution support, which is nice, because we live in a day and age where it's 4K or best, right? And with that, we got some quality of life changes. You want to go over some of these?
Well, obviously the graphical enhancement.
Yes.
They added better or newer weapons, right?
They added a couple of new weapons. Yes, the gearbox weapons.
Right.
They fixed the boss fight at the end with the vault monster. I can't remember what
The
his name is.
Destroyer?
The Destroyer. There we go. They made it more challenging and more rewarding, is what they're stating. And I would say they did an okay job with that.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like a completely new boss fight, nor did it feel unfair or completely broken. But the loot, I did notice a difference in the loot towards the end, right?
Yeah.
And then a couple of other things they had. They added the golden key chest, which was originally introduced in Borderlands 2. So for those of you not familiar with the system, you get golden keys through promotional events via Borderlands and all those guys, and you enter these codes into your game, and you get these premium keys, right? It's not, I wouldn't call it like DLC, or I wouldn't call it microtransactions.
No.
It's just kind of being involved with the community and all that stuff. And you get to pop up in this chest, and you get some nice scaled weapons. First and foremost, scaled, which is important.
Oh, yeah.
And most of the time, they're pretty quality. You get some good stuff out of there. Purples, right?
Oh, yeah,
Purples are guaranteed.
Basically purples. That's what you mainly get.
And so I think that was a really nice addition because think about playing through Borderlands 1 again. Oh, and the mini map. Let's not forget the fucking mini map.
Oh yeah.
That is so grossly underappreciated in Borderlands 1 because once you get used to it and some of the sequential entries, I don't think you go back, man.
No.
It's really gross, especially with like a lot of those areas that twist and turn and in and out. Yeah, man, it's a total pain in the ass.
They added that was a new thing, like in the top right hand corner.
Yeah, the mini map.
That was actually kind of glitched out sometimes here and there.
Oh yeah, when we were playing dual or multiple
yeah.
players in the lobby. Yeah, that got kind of hairy, but it is there, and you can disable it if you're a hardcore purist. But that being said, I think these quality of life changes weren't super intrusive.
No.
I think they actually. That's why I call them quality of life because they improve the quality of life of the game. I love the minimap. I can't go back to playing Borderlands 1 without it. If I boot it up on my Xbox 360, I don't think I'm going to be able to plow through it without like pulling some hair out.
Especially with General Knox and those highway systems.
Oh man, that was brutal. Absolutely brutal. Even if when we had the mini map, I still had to pull up the big map on our Echo devices. And
I did that a couple times.
Pain in the ass. I want to touch a little bit on the golden keys and the chest. I love it. I love it. The big thing is that they're not making a profit off this because they very easily could have turned this into a microtransaction DLC
definitely.
situation. They could have done the EA route, right? But like I said, it's involvement in the community and it's love for the product, the people in the game. And it's a reward. It really is. It's a treat because you know how many times we hit that damn thing and we were just going crazy. It's like, hey, I got gold keys. Let's go spend them.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a nice little way of pushing the player forward. Okay, so that's quality of life changes with the enhanced version. Now, let's talk DLCs first.
Oh, boy.
So you get 3 main DLCs and a little side DLC.
Yeah.
So you know the order of these. I don't know the order. What is the campaign sequential order?
Ooh,
Zombie Island of Dr. Ned.
Zombie Island, and then it
General
was
Knox's.
General Knox, and then
the Robo Revolution, right?
Revolution,
And then you got Moxie's Underdome. Let's actually start with Moxie's Underdome because it'll be nice and easy to cover.
Yeah.
So Moxie's Underdome is the game's effort to make because there's already another version of I don't know, what do you want to call it, like a Royal Rumble, a survival thing?
Yeah,
like a survival mini game, let's call it, right? Because you already have one in Skag Gully with, it was really easy. It was like 3 rounds or 4 rounds, whatever.
3 rounds.
Yeah. And so you plowed through that. But in this one, you have 3 different arenas with 3 different enemy sets. You have modifiers, which are a total pain in the ass or totally great, depending on which ones you get.
Yep.
And then you have the arena itself. It's different layout and all that good stuff. So you got Hellburbia, the Angelic Ruins. I can't remember the third one. What'd you think of this DLC, man? Do you think... Obviously, it's included in the Game of the Year, and that's what we got. But do you think it was worth the, whatever, $10 when it came out? Because essentially, there's no story to it, right?
Yeah, no, there's no story.
You get an intro cutscene, and then it kind of tosses you in. But it did introduce the bank system, which I thought was a nice little touch.
Yeah, storing your weapons. I wouldn't say it's worth the $10, just because it's kind of like really, it's a small thing.
All right, if we were in 2009.
Yeah, if we were in 2009.
But since you do have the Game of the Year edition, and I'm assuming most people do in this day and age, right?
Yeah.
Do you think it was worth the time we spent on it? Because we spent way more time than we anticipated on this, right? We thought it was going to be like a 2-3 hours in and out, but we spent, maybe a couple days on it at, 3 hours a piece?
Yeah, 3 hours. Yeah, per like arena.
What were we doing in 3 days, 4 days?
3 days.
3 days? Okay. So do you think it was worth the playthrough time? No?
No, not really.
He's shaking his head over there. No.
No.
Because the only reward you get is a skill point.
Yeah.
And I do like the idea of giving a skill point as a reward for players. I don't think it was executed properly, though.
No.
I felt like this should have been the very last thing
you could have done. The whole game. And those weapons that dropped after each round.
Man, those weapons, because it wasn't, I don't believe it was scaled properly to us, because we did do it on playthrough 1, and we were level 30 odd and some change, right?
Those enemies still kind of kicked our ass.
So modifiers, right? The big thing for this was that it's not just a straight playthrough, rumble, arena fight, whatever maybe. You got modifiers past the first wave of each level.
Yeah.
And some of these modifiers was enemies have increased shields. Enemies do increased bullet damage. You constantly lose health, or you get vampirism.
Yeah.
You think these modifiers helped to make this Moxie's Underdome more interesting?
I think they definitely helped. It gave kind of a different perspective of the whole game. It made especially like how you said, the enemies weren't scaled to us, but I still felt like we were struggling sometimes.
Yeah, some of those matches we were getting our asses handed to us.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I feel like it was a nice little touch. It kind of spiced up the gameplay here and there.
I got mixed feelings about the modifiers because I do think it definitely helped us enjoy it more, but modifiers can also kind of take away from the experience. You know, if you work so hard on getting like like a really nice shotgun, right, and then
Yeah.
suddenly shotguns don't do any damage, only pistols do damage. It feels kind of broken.
Yeah.
Or the worst was when snipers do increased damage and everything else does reduced damage because snipers in this game were fucking terrible, man.
Oh,
That bullet sway.
The recoil too.
That and rocket launchers. I'm glad they fixed that in later entries in the series.
Yeah.
But rocket launchers
Were glitched.
were bad. Were bad.
were-
At least in the Game of the Year enhanced version on PC.
Oh yeah.
Because a lot of the times you'd fire dead center on them and the rocket would veer and this and that and it just wouldn't do anything.
Well, I felt like sometimes even if the rocket hit them, it wouldn't even do any damage. Like
Yeah,
their
absolutely.
health bar
The
wouldn't even like,
blast
go
radius
down.
was just ridiculous in some
Yeah.
cases. And sniper rifles, man, I just feel like it wasn't worth the time.
No.
It was
no.
definitely not worth the time and investment to getting a nice sniper in that
You
game.
would literally aim at their head, fire the bullet, and nothing would happen.
Yeah, sometimes it was like that, and we actually came across a couple issues where that should have been a guaranteed headshot, but it missed
wasn't.
or it hit like the chest area, you know?
Yep.
Total BS. But whatever. What are you gonna do, right? The mechanics were a little bit different, and they, like I said, did end up fixing them. Now let's get into the good ones. So the first campaign, the DLC campaign that you should play is the Zombie Island of Dr. Ned.
Phenomenal.
Okay, I love this thing, and it's probably one of my favorite DLCs of all time. So it opens up with the Jacobs Corporation hiring Dr. Ned.
Ned.
So Zombie Ned's Dr. Island is the first of the DLCs you should play. And so let's talk about it. I love this DLC. It's probably one of my favorite DLCs ever, right?
Yep.
And what made it so beautiful? What made it so awesome?
At least from my perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
I like the kind of like the atmosphere that it gave. As I mentioned, it was the horror-ish without the horror. The enemies themselves, you know, with the zombies and the werewolves, kind of added a nice little touch. And then even some of the side missions. Unfortunately, yeah, the collecting the brains one was tedious, but it was definitely worth it at the end. But overall, I mean, it was a phenomenal DLC.
I think the level design was really nice because it had this swamp/mire kind of feel to it, and it really felt like a genuine attempt at a, like a traditional horror idea, and that's what made it so fun. So these enemies, like I mentioned, they don't have guns; they're zombies, right?
Yeah.
And most of these, like the werewolf zombies, whatever, they don't have projectiles, with the exception of the spitter, some of the werewolves, yada yada. There's not a whole bunch, right?
No.
How do you think that changes the dynamic of the gunplay and kind of the gameplay, really?
Well, since they didn't have guns or anything, I felt like there were a lot more of them like on the
Swarming?
screen. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of swarming. Gunplay, I felt like I was using mainly submachine guns and shotguns within this playthrough. Didn't
Absolutely,
Really,
shotguns will be your best friend on this
yeah.
DLC.
oh yeah, and then phase walks sometimes, like since I played as Lilith, got you out of like the tight situations.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
So with that gunplay from the enemies being removed, what they introduced was like a slowing mechanic. So like if you get hit by a spitter, you'll slow down to almost like a walking speed. Or if you're caught in like one of the swamp muddy lands, you're gonna slow down, and that's really fucking annoying.
Oh yeah.
But I think it's a good balancing act between the two. Personally, I love the zombie enemies. I love the whole break they took away from the traditional bandit and the guardians. All the older enemies. I think that this was a good change of pace, and I think this campaign of this DLC plays a little bit slower, but I think that's a good thing because a lot of the times when you're walking through and it's your first time playing, you want to enjoy the atmosphere and the ambiance and the music. The music was great, and a lot of these characters you love come back, like TK Baha's the zombie this time around, and you get a lot of these like newer bosses like Pumpkinhead. You get Dr. Jekyll, and of course the big bad guy Dr. Ned, which is probably my favorite boss fight in this game, easily hands down.
Oh yeah.
But I think what we got here was. It wasn't Gearbox copping out. They were adapting to the time and the market, and I think they did a really fucking good job with this DLC because even though it was slower and even though there was like physical slowing of your character and, a lot of the times you just be surrounded by hundreds of zombies, but you're like, oh, well, I got to deal with it, right?
Yep.
But it was fun, and that's what matters most because they did a total 180 on a lot of these things that the OG Borderlands campaign did, but I love it. And I love it, and it was fucking phenomenal. And I love the whole Jacobs Corporation. That's my favorite manufacturer. And I love that they were trying to make a super soldier, and Dr. Ned got involved. Whatever. So, second campaign, the Army of General Knox. Armory. Whoops. I have kind of mixed feelings on this one. I know a lot of people love this DLC as because of the armory thing, right? Or it's a very easy spot to farm. So the theme of this was big highways, big mechas,
Big open areas.
big open areas, things of that nature, right? I don't think on the surface this is a bad DLC. I think it provides decent enough content to warrant it as a DLC, as a proper DLC, right?
Yeah.
My issue was a lot with the driving aspect. These
that's my
highways
issue.
feel like fucking highways.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't mean you hop on like your local highway 10 minutes to get to wherever, to your buddy's place, right? It felt like you were driving like half an hour sometimes. And you really trudged along, man.
Yeah, and then those Lance, vehicles didn't help either.
The Lance probes, the Lance vehicles, everything's coming
Yeah.
at you on the highway too. And it's not super awesome.
No.
And the early parts of this DLC, I felt like were a total slodge to me. Because in the early parts, you got to unblock this highway, unblock that highway, find this person, do that. It felt like your typical RPG cop-out missions. Where
Yeah.
It felt more like a side quest than it did a main quest. And I had a decent amount of fun with this DLC. But that was kind of my big issue, was that getting from A to B, dude, it can take a long time. It could take 20 real-world minutes to get from the start of this to the armory, really.
Yeah.
And I don't know, man. I feel like I get the theme. I get the idea, and I get the appeal because a lot of these bosses were fun. Ajax was fun.
Ajax.
General Knox was fun.
The
Sister Assassins.
Yeah, the Sister Assassins.
Those were fun, but just getting there, man, was a total pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Anything notable besides Crawler Max? We didn't plow through Crawler Max yet.
No.
We plan on going back and taking care of that. But what did you like about this DLC?
One of my second favorite enemies to verse are the Lance. I generally like this DLC mainly because, they weren't scaled to us when we were playing through. They were kind of easy to take down, but
A little bit easier.
yeah, but if they were actually scaled, I feel like they would have provided a little bit more of a challenge. Especially like with the new Lance enemies, like you have those those Rocketeers, and then
Those are a pain in the ass.
and then all the
And
other
the
ones.
Elemental Warriors.
Yeah, the Elemental Warriors.
With the shields, yeah.
Just versing those kind of added like a new little, element to the gunplay as well as just overall, enemies, because it's not the same thing over and over again with bandits. It's not just like, oh, you have a shield, okay, but
Oh,
now
and
it's
those,
like,
you remember the drifters?
oh yeah, the
big
drifters.
motherfuckers.
Yeah,
I did not like those guys, and it wasn't like a gameplay or design choice. They were just a pain in the ass to fucking fight sometimes,
Yeah.
especially if you're on the
Those-
vehicle.
The gun runners didn't help either. You had to get out on foot and probably just shoot them.
Absolutely. So, a fun little side note. What we ended up doing for Army of General Knox was we tried farming the armory. That didn't go so well. So what I ended up
Nope.
doing was I went into the Willow engine and dropped the gravity from -500 to -30. So we would just kind of float around. And we farmed the armory a couple times because we couldn't do the grenade and rocket jumps because we're scrubs like that.
Oh yeah.
But so yeah, we did it that way, and it was like you hit the space bar and you would just float, man. You'd float up for like 30 solid seconds before you even started to come back down.
It worked.
It was
though.
really gross. Yeah, I think we got our fair share of weapons and stuff out of it.
Unfortunately, your game is kind of.
Yeah, now we can't play on. I can't host a game because now that Willow engine, it won't revert to what it was prior because I done goofed it up. But the General Knox, I think what it does is it feels like Pandora first and foremost because the Zombie Island of Dr. Ned, yeah, I believe it's on Pandora. But did it feel like what we got from Pandora?
Oh no.
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 This definitely felt like it. It felt like an extension, and it felt like a natural part of the game that was always there.
Yeah.
But it was just hadn't been released yet, And I think that's what this thing did really well. Whereas you got Skagoli, Firestone, those early levels that didn't have real roads, that were kind of barren desert, like Nevada-ish, right?
Yeah.
But this was a little bit more civilized in its aspect, and it provided some good insight. Because the Lance are a big threat, really, in the first game. And I think it says a lot when you see what these guys have constructed, what they've done, and the highway system. Granted, I didn't like driving on the highways,
No.
but it was nice when you look at it from a story perspective, that these guys in a planet of lawlessness are trying to bring law, order, justice, all that good stuff in their own sick, twisted way.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you look at the Army of General Knox, Armory, geez, I keep doing that, the Armory of General Knox DLC as an extension of the main game, I think it feels right and I think it feels natural. I think that's what this did for me. And there were times where I didn't want to play, I'm going to be honest with you, through the Armory. But we slodged through. And that's what's important. We slodged through for the audience, and we're going to keep pushing through. Now we got one more DLC to cover.
Oh yeah.
Take me through this. The Revolution of Claptrap.
Oh. Yeah, I was like one more. Kind of blanking on this DLC.
You're blanking out. Well, this is the most recent one we played, man. What's up with you?
Yeah. Short term.
So the Rebel Revolution of DLC brings us to the Tartar Station.
Yeah.
which is a kind of a metropolitan area. There's a train station, a couple of housing units, blah, blah, blah. And Claptrap has started a robot revolution, as by the name. And so what you see a lot of is you see a lot of Claptrap units dressed up as samurai, dressed up as Viking warriors, all that good stuff. They're coming at you, and they're going to fuck your shit up if you're not
This
careful.
is also when the Hyperion enemies were introduced, right?
Yes, absolutely. This campaign, I didn't actually plow through it on my original playthrough of Borderlands 10 years ago, but I'm glad we got through it this time. I like this campaign. I think what they tried to do with Claptrap here was they tried to make him a bit more of a serious character, and they tried to have him have some spunk, let's call it, right? And they really jazzed him up a bit, and seeing an army of Claptraps was great. But really, I think what Gearbox did here was they made the Claptrap units, the ones you pop and destroy, they made those so you can, project your anger onto these Claptrap units and destroy them for all the dumb shit he said throughout the game.
Right.
So I think the mission progression was okay. You get hired on by this mysterious man, blah, blah, stop the revolution, all that good stuff. Had a lot of, ironically, communist propaganda in this DLC,
yeah.
which is nice to see. It's kind of sign of the times, all that good stuff. Let's talk about the boss fights, because I think the boss fights on this DLC were probably the hardest out of all of them.
Yeah.
With the exception of Max.
And Dr. Ned.
Dr. Ned was easy. Easy peasy. Okay, so you get robo versions of most of the bosses you've defeated before. And it's pretty nasty. So you get a robo version of Commander Steel. You get a robo version of Dr. Ned from the Zombie Island. You get a robo version of General Knox. And then you get the big ninja Claptrap, the massive unit.
Fuck that thing.
I think it was nice seeing all these characters come back for the last DLC. I think it was kind of Borderlands referencing itself, almost in like a funny satirical way, and I like that. I liked killing these guys. They played relatively the same as to what their counterparts were, all that good stuff. But they had the
Commander Steel was kind of different because
Oh yeah, you didn't actually fight her.
Yeah, I like how she had the patch though, where the hole was.
Yeah, that was
She got
hilarious.
Stabbed.
But yeah, man, I liked playing these bosses again, and I don't think it felt like a cop out because you could have made new enemies and blah blah. But it makes sense to bring these guys back for one last huzzah, right? I like playing through them. Now the final boss was a total pain in the ass. I did not like playing through this.
Man.
We died a lot.
Yeah. Maybe you hate Claptrap even more.
Yeah, so they brought out this massive Claptrap unit, and it had turrets on it. It was
Rockets.
summoning rockets. It was summoning other Claptraps to come.
In the
like
arena,
suicide Claptraps.
there was like nowhere to hide besides like one rock.
Yeah, well, the arena, for those of you who haven't played this, is the original where you spawn in on Firestone. It's the very first thing you see. And yeah, now you got to defeat this massive Claptrap unit. The guy who helped you in the beginning is now your enemy.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, so it was a fun boss fight. I think it was fun. I just think that some of these mechanics, if you're going into this game blind or if you haven't done this boss fight before, this fight's going to be a total pain in the ass for you, no way. And like I said, we had issues with it. We had a lot of issues. I kept going down, Greg kept going down, but we plowed through. Somehow, some way, we plowed through because his health didn't reset.
I think I died at least like 5-6 times.
Yeah, man. So, you think the boss fight was worth it in the long run?
I mean,
oh, okay. Well, do you think the DLC was worth playing through?
Okay, I actually liked this DLC. I mean, next to the Zombie Island and Dr. Ned, this DLC was actually kind of more funner. Like you said, I like how they brought back a lot of the other boss fights and enemies that you plowed through with. And then, I don't know, like the whole versing the Claptraps is also great. And then the final boss fight, yeah, it was a pain in the ass, but it was something different.
Oh, we plowed through it, right?
Yeah.
And it was hard, but we always like a good challenge.
Mm.
And, we plowed through and all that good stuff. I think it's clear to me how these DLCs rank. But let's talk about kind of our first experiences with this game. Who did you play the very first time you booted up this?
I played
Borderlands 1.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
I played as Roland.
You played as Roland. How did you like Roland? How did you play?
His turret, I felt like in the beginning was very weak, but you had to actually like spend the skill points and whatnot to level up. And then in the later game, it actually helped out a lot.
Awesome.
The fact that he was proficient in assault rifles helped out a lot too, because I felt like assault rifles in this game were a little more useful.
Now, going back and playing the Game of the Year Enhanced Edition, the 10-year anniversary,
Yep.
You didn't play Roland. I played Roland. But do you think it was worth going back and re-experiencing everything?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Especially with Borderlands 3 around the corner.
Yeah. So my first time ever playing, I played Mordecai, and I think he was really good because I played most of that campaign on single player.
Yeah.
The beauty of this game is that it's split screen on console, But a lot of like me, nobody really comes around, and 10 years ago, especially, nobody came around.
Yeah.
So playing with Mordecai was, I feel, was a bit of a good thing on single player experience. I totally think us replaying and reliving all the glory days was phenomenal. Like you said, Borderlands 3 is right around the corner, and we'll get into it with the Borderlands 2 talk. I keep like referencing it,
Yeah.
but you really see what they've come from, and I think this is an excellent starting point. Okay, so what's your favorite DLC? I think we have the same one.
Zombie Island.
Zombie Island, then Robo Revolution.
Then Robo Revolution.
Then
General Knox, and then Moxie's Underdome.
Yeah, no, my rankings are exactly the same. I feel like you can tell how much love and effort were put into each. Because General Knox, yeah, there was some love, and there was here and there, and they had its redeeming moments, but I feel like the overall, it was a chore getting through it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my opinion. I don't feel like we need to rank Moxie's Underdome, but yeah, it is last place for me, because it really is a mini game at the end of the day, right?
Yep.
The Jacob's Cove, the Zombie Island of Dr. Ned.
Phenomenal,
man. It's, like I said, easily one of my top DLCs of all time. What is your favorite weapon manufacturer?
Mine is actually, I prefer Malawan.
Malawan!
I love elementals, man.
Yeah,
Always
you're a
come in
sucker for
handy.
that stuff. I'm the total opposite end of the spectrum. I love Jacobs. I love the high base damage. I love the whole. It wasn't introduced in this game, but fires as fast as you can pull the trigger.
Yeah.
I love that gimmick. I love the high base damage. I even just love the look of a lot of these Jacobs weapons. They have this like pseudo cyberpunk Western feel. Yeah, go ahead.
I think that was actually the twos thing, because I believe Jacobs was before it was, if you had to fire more than once, then it wasn't a Jacobs.
Well, that was the slogan. But yeah,
Right.
they didn't introduce that gameplay mechanic until 2. But I'm just saying, I love the look of them. I love the feel of them. You feel like it's a Jacobs. I feel like not a lot of weapons, at least in the sound design and the feel like consistently throughout the manufacturer.
I actually do like the Western looks of the Jacobs too.
Yeah,
With
phenomenal,
the
man. Especially if
snipers
you
and the
get like a higher level
revolvers.
weapon like a purple with the engravings on the side.
Oh yeah.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a sucker for that space cowboy shit, as you know. Favorite boss?
Favorite boss?
Including all the DLCs.
Probably has to be. I mean, I actually like General Knox.
You like
'cause-
fighting him?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was an alright fight.
It was kind of a slodge. I mean, especially since, at least in Robo Revolution, you pumped a lot of bullets into him,
Mhm.
but I feel like it was a decent challenge overall. I mean, yeah, you could headshot him to get him a critical and then, kind of knock him back, but I felt like it was a good challenge.
Okay, I liked the Dr. Ned fight. I just thought it was hilarious because you kill the human form of Dr. Ned, and then if you're on, I played on Xbox 360, and you got an achievement for one game point, and it was like, kill Dr. Ned, or not really, and then you jump down into the pit, you fight the big motherfucker. I don't know, I just think that fight was a fun fight, it was a fair fight, and the humor was there. It really shined through.
Yeah.
And then when you kill the big guy, you get the 99 for the full 100 for the boss fight.
Yeah.
I really like that fight. I love that whole DLC, like I said. So what else? All right, let's talk about the legacy of this game. Borderlands as a series has one of the strongest followings in the current game market. I think that's the first statement to say.
Oh yeah.
When the first game came out, I think all of us were kind of weary as to where this would land on the market and how it would line up with all these other massive AAA titles and the whole scope of gaming, right?
Yeah.
But I think Borderlands 1 really paved the way for a lot of games like The Division and Division 2,
Destiny.
Destiny. Yeah, a lot of these looter shooters that you're getting now. And I think what they did with blending two totally polar opposite genres into one nice experience was phenomenal. I think that when you think looter shooter, you think Borderlands. Even if you haven't played it, I think that's a fair statement. Because a lot of these mechanics translate over. A lot of this gameplay fundamentals translate over into newer titles and newer games. And it's been, like I said, 10 years since the first Borderlands games dropped. And I feel like this community is as strong as ever. You got a lot of phenomenal content creators out there like Vanilla Puma, Killer 6, all these guys out there that are still cranking out Borderlands lists, like what guns, where to farm this, fastest way to do this, X, Y, and Z. And to see that it's been such a consistent fan base and such a consistent content creation base, it really kind of warms my heart.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, this game came out of left field in 2009, and we were all kind of worried about it.
Took a complete gamble, and then it's turned out to be like one of the best things.
The random number generation was in our favor, or
Yeah.
in Gearbox's favor in this instance,
yeah.
right? And if you haven't played Borderlands, or if you haven't played it in a while, by all means pick it up on Steam, pick it up on the Xbox store, the PlayStation store, and play through it. especially if you're planning to get 3. I think when you go back and play it, you won't be disappointed, and you'll relive kind of the original hype
Yeah.
that was there for this game and the
You'll have
beauty
a
of it.
more of an appreciation.
Yeah, more of an appreciation. And so the plan right now is we're gonna do a full Borderlands kind of series talk, and this was our Borderlands 1 talk. Thank you for listening, and join us for the next episode.
Peace.